I remember you before this moment.
She knew she had already lost him. The certainty arrived before the memory, like pain before understanding. A pressure behind her eyes, a familiar absence, the kind that followed mistakes that could not be undone. The human stood across from her in the observation corridor, hands relaxed at his sides, posture respectful but unguarded. He was not what the council would have selected. No markers of significance, no genetic anomalies, no statistical importance. If she had encountered him through data alone, she would never have paused. Yet her breathing slowed the moment she saw him. For a fraction of a second, less than a blink, her mind fractured into overlapping moments. Not images, sensations, the echo of a room she did not recognize, the weight of silence that came after words that mattered too late, the hollow knowledge of reaching for someone who was no longer there. She steadied herself, drawing her awareness back into the present. This was the first time she had seen him. That was the problem. The future memories did not arrive as visions. Her kind did not see what would happen. They remembered what had already mattered. Time for them was not a line but a field, dense with impressions, emotional gravity-bending moments toward significance. And this human carried weight. She lifted her gaze fully to his face, allowing protocol to mask the tremor beneath her calm. His eyes met hers without fear, without calculation. He did not look away. That, too, felt wrong. Humans were supposed to flinch under prolonged contact. Their nervous systems registered her kind as dominance, as threat. He simply looked at her as if waiting to be acknowledged. Something tightened in her chest. Not pain, recognition. She had felt this before. Not now. Later. She turned slightly, angling her body as required by the observation charter, but her attention remained locked on him. Around them, the corridor hummed with distant systems, artificial gravity stabilizers, environmental regulators, the quiet machinery that made the station feel alive. Normally, these sounds anchored her. Now they felt distant, irrelevant. "State your designation," she said, her voice even, controlled. The words triggered another disturbance. Not a memory this time, but an absence where one should have been. She knew with unsettling clarity that she had once spoken his name differently, softly, in a context that no longer existed. He answered, calm, unremarkable. The sound of his voice settled something inside her and confirmed her fear. If she continued this evaluation, the future would solidify. Observation created probability. Probability hardened into outcome. Her kind had learned this long ago and built laws around it. Do not linger on moments that pull at you. Do not feed significance. Do not choose what the future is already trying to take. She should have toggled the transfer, assigned another observer, filed a neutral report. Instead, she held his gaze a second longer than protocol allowed. Her mind whispered a truth she had been avoiding since the first pulse of recognition. If she walked away now, the memory would fade. If she stayed, it would sharpen. And somewhere ahead, unfixed but waiting, was the moment she would lose him. She did not yet know how, only that it would hurt in a way her species had no word for. She straightened, expression unreadable, authority settling over her features like armor. "This will take longer than expected," she said. The human nodded, unaware that the future had just leaned closer to becoming real, and that she, for the first time in her existence, was considering stepping directly into a memory she was meant to avoid. She did not submit the report. The omission was subtle, an unfinished field, a deferred classification, a delay justified by technical review. The system accepted it without protest. Systems always did. They were built to trust her. The human remained in the auxiliary observation chamber, seated where she had indicated, hands folded loosely, gaze drifting with the slow curvature of the viewport. Beyond the transparent alloy, a star burned white and distant, its light refracted into a spectrum by the station's shielding. He watched it with quiet attention, as if he had nowhere else he needed to be. That, too, unsettled her. She observed him from the corridor, unseen, letting her awareness skim the edges of the moment without sinking into it. This was how her kind avoided significance, by refusing depth, by never staying long enough for meaning to form. Yet the future pressed against her perception like a bruise. It was stronger now, not clearer but heavier, the sensation of something important approaching with the inevitability of gravity. She felt it in the subtle delay of her thoughts, in the way her chest tightened when she considered leaving. She had lost him. The memory, if it could be called that, had grown more defined since their first exchange. Not images, never images, but emotions arranged in sequence. Concern, warmth, a quiet certainty, then absence, not death. Loss did not always require an ending. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself, then stepped into the chamber. The human noticed immediately. He stood, not abruptly, not slowly. His movements carried no defensive urgency. He simply rose to meet the change in the room. "You said this would take longer," he said, not as an accusation. An observation. "Yes." She inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than apology. "You may sit." He did, again, without hesitation. She circled once, deliberately, as if gathering data from angles rather than from him directly. Her kind could read micro-variations in posture, respiration, pulse. He registered as steady, curious, alert in a way that suggested openness rather than fear. "Do you know why you were selected for this evaluation?" she asked. "No," he said. "I was told I was available." That should not have mattered, and yet it did. Availability implied chance. Chance implied paths not yet reinforced by repetition, futures less dense, more fragile, more changeable. Her gaze returned to his face, and with it came another pressure, familiar now, like a warning signal her body had learned to recognize. This one carried a different texture, not loss, anticipation. She almost recoiled from it. "You are not required to impress me," she said, "nor to perform." "I know," he replied. Then after a pause, "But I'm allowed to answer honestly, right?" The question struck her harder than it should have. Honesty was not forbidden. It was simply inefficient. Truth introduced variables. Variables complicated outcomes. "Yes," she said, "you are allowed." He nodded, as if confirming something to himself rather than responding to her. The future shifted. It was subtle but undeniable. The emotional weight rearranged itself, like furniture moved in a dark room. The absence remained, but now it was preceded by something warmer, a memory that had not existed before. She had not remembered this part last time. Her pulse regulated, precise, stuttered once. That was not possible. "You are experiencing discomfort," he said gently. She froze. "No," she replied immediately, too quickly. "I'm not trying to be invasive," he continued. "It's just, you look like someone who's bracing for impact." Silence settled between them, thick and charged. The station's hum felt suddenly intrusive, as if the universe itself were eavesdropping. She should have ended the session, logged the anomaly, removed herself before the future gained further mass. Instead, she asked, "What do you do when you know something will hurt you?" He considered this, eyes lowering briefly, then lifting again, not to challenge her but to meet her where she stood. "Depends," he said. "Is it avoidable?" She did not answer. "If it's not," he continued, "then I try to make sure it meant something. Pain's worse when it's empty." The words landed with quiet force. Meaning. That was the variable her species feared most. Her future memory responded instantly, not with pain but with resonance. The absence echoed louder, sharper. Whatever she would lose, it would not be empty. She felt suddenly, achingly present. "This session is concluded," she said, rising. He stood as well, slower this time, as if reluctant to disturb the moment. "Will I see you again?" The question should have had a simple answer. Protocol offered one. Instinct offered another. The future, fragmented, insistent, offered neither. She met his gaze, and for the first time, allowed herself to wonder not how she would lose him, but what she would become if she didn't walk away. "Yes," she said, and somewhere ahead of them the memory changed again, quietly rewriting itself around a choice that had not existed before. She dreamed of him before she slept. The realization came while she was still standing in the transit lift, descending through layers of the station that no human had clearance to enter. Her mind was alert, her body upright, and yet the sensation was unmistakable, the soft distortion of perception that accompanied precognitive recall. This memory was different. It was not heavy, not distant. It was intimate in a way that unsettled her more than any sense of loss had. She remembered the sound of his breathing in a quiet space, not labored, not urgent, simply present. She remembered the weight of stillness shared, not imposed. She had no memory of how they had arrived there together. That omission terrified her, her quarters sealed behind her with a muted chime. The lighting adjusted automatically, responding to elevated neural activity. She did not sit. Sitting invited introspection, and introspection invited futures to intrude. Instead, she crossed to the viewport and rested her palm against the transparent surface. Beyond it, the stars stretched in slow arcs, indifferent to the choices of individuals. Her species had long ago learned to treat time as terrain, to navigate it without becoming lost within it. Futures were surveyed, catalogued, and, when necessary, avoided. Emotional entanglement was considered a navigational hazard, and yet here she was, tracing the outline of a human presence that had already begun to alter the map. She had told him he would see her again. That promise now existed in multiple directions. A soft tone sounded at the edge of her awareness, a priority channel request. She turned from the viewport, instinctively bracing for interference. The council did not tolerate delays without cause. She accepted the transmission. The chamber around her dissolved into a projection of crystalline geometry and shifting light. A voice emerged from the pattern, layered with harmonics that signified collective authority rather than an individual speaker. "You have not submitted your evaluation," the council said. "I am aware," she replied. "There is no anomaly registered in the subject's data," the voice continued. "No threat markers, no strategic value. Explain the delay." She could have answered with logic, with caution, with acceptable uncertainty. Any of those would have sufficed. Instead, the truth rose unbidden to her thoughts. "He matters," she said. Silence followed, then, "Define matters." She hesitated. In that hesitation, the future pressed closer, eager, almost hopeful. She felt the memory of loss pulse in response, as if warning her of the cost of articulation. "He creates emotional variance," she said carefully. "In me." The chamber shifted, the light fractured. "That is not possible," the council said. "I agree," she replied, "and yet." The pause that followed was longer than before, deliberate, calculated. "Your role is observation," the voice said at last, "not participation." "I know." "Then disengage." The command reverberated through her nervous system, designed to compel compliance. She felt it activate instinctive safeguards, ancient conditioning that had preserved her species across epochs, and beneath it, something else responded. Not resistance, choice. She severed the connection. The projection collapsed, leaving her alone in the quiet of her quarters. Her pulse remained elevated longer than acceptable parameters allowed. She made no effort to correct it. For the first time, she considered the possibility that the future was not warning her. It was waiting. She left her quarters without informing station command. The auxiliary chamber was dimmer than before, the star outside now partially eclipsed by the slow rotation of the station. The human was still there, standing, this time, close to the viewport, hands resting against the glass as if anchoring himself. He turned when he sensed her presence. He always did. The future confirmed that this, at least, would never change. "You came back," he said. "Yes." No preamble, no protocol. She stood beside him, close enough that the edge of her awareness caught the subtle warmth of his body. It startled her. She had not remembered this detail before. "I should not be here," she said. He studied her profile, respectful of the silence between words. "Then why are you?" She closed her eyes. Because in every version of the future she remembered, there was a moment where she stood alone, holding the shape of him like an ache. Because this moment, this ordinary, unremarkable closeness, was never present in those memories. "I am trying something," she said quietly, "that my species avoids." He waited. "I am staying," she finished. The future shifted, not violently, not abruptly. It softened. And in that softening, a new memory began to form, one that did not end in absence but in uncertainty. For the first time, she did not know what she would lose, only that whatever came next would be real. The station noticed her absence before the council did. Security fields adjusted their thresholds. Internal traffic rerouted around sealed corridors. A silent recalibration rippled through the architecture, the kind reserved for anomalies that could not yet be named. She felt it as a pressure at the back of her awareness, a distant tightening, like the universe drawing breath. The human felt nothing. They stood together longer than either of them realized, sharing the slow drift of stars without speaking. Silence behaved differently with him present. It did not stretch or accuse, it simply existed. "This place feels suspended," he said at last, "like it's waiting for something." She turned her head slightly. "It is." "For what?" She did not answer immediately. The future stirred, uncertain, as if it too were listening. "For me to decide whether I am still what I was designed to be." He absorbed that without visible reaction. Humans, she was learning, did not rush to fill gaps with noise. Some of them allowed meaning to arrive on its own. "What were you designed to be?" he asked. She considered telling him the truth, that she was a temporal navigator, an observer assigned to prevent entanglements that destabilized probability fields, that her purpose was to stand at the edge of becoming and quietly step away. Instead, she said, certain. He smiled faintly, not amused, understanding. "I don't think certainty is a design feature," he said, "more like a phase." The words echoed through her with surprising force. A phase implied transition, motion, an end that did not require erasure. The future responded again. This time it did not bring loss. It brought a warning. Her vision blurred not darkness but overlap. She saw the corridor as it was and as it would be moments from now. The same lights, the same walls, but the air was sharper, charged, armed figures moving with purpose. Intervention. She stepped away from him instinctively, placing herself half a pace forward, body angling between him and the corridor entrance. "What's wrong?" he asked. "They are coming," she said. "Who?" "The consequence of my delay." The station's lighting shifted to emergency spectrum, a low amber glow that signaled containment rather than danger. Footsteps approached, measured, synchronized. Not guards, enforcers, her kind. She had remembered this moment before. In every previous version of the future, this was where the loss began. She felt the familiar ache rise, ready to claim its place. And then something changed. He did not retreat. Instead, he moved closer to her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. A human gesture, instinctive, protective despite its futility. "You don't have to explain," he said quietly. "Just tell me what you need." The future fractured, not into chaos but into possibility. She had never remembered this response, never felt this option. "I need you to trust me," she said. "I already do." The words settled into her like an anchor. The corridor doors parted. Two figures entered, their presence bending the space around them. Their eyes reflected the station's light with the same cold precision as her own, once. They regarded her first, then the human, as if he were already irrelevant. "You have violated observational protocol," one of them said. "Step away from the subject." She did not move. "This divergence is unauthorized," the other continued. "It will be corrected." Corrected meant removed, memory pruned, probability realigned. The future surged, loud and insistent. This was the moment she always remembered standing alone. She turned her head just enough to meet the human's eyes. "I need you to listen," she said. "What happens next may feel wrong, but you must not let go of me." His brow furrowed slightly. "I wasn't planning to." She reached for him. The contact was brief, fingertips brushing his wrist, but the effect was immediate. Her perception flared, time unfolding not forward, not backward, but outward. She saw branching paths, some dim, some brilliant, none fixed. And in many of them, he was still there. The enforcers reacted instantly, energy fields activating, reality tightening around the anomaly she had become. "Release him," they commanded. She did not. For the first time in her existence, she did not step away from a future that hurt. She stepped into it, hand in hand with someone who did not belong there at all. And somewhere beyond the station's walls, the memory of loss finally cracked, revealing not an ending, but a door she had never allowed herself to open. The station shuddered, not from impact but from indecision. Containment fields surged, then hesitated, their algorithms colliding with contradictory inputs. She felt the strain ripple through the infrastructure like a question asked too loudly. The future had split wide enough that the system could no longer determine which version of events it was meant to enforce. She tightened her grip on his wrist. The contact was no longer a point in time. It was a line. A thread stretched across branching possibilities, anchoring her awareness to the present with a force she had never experienced. "Do not interfere," one of the enforcers said. Its voice carried harmonic commands designed to destabilize emotional coherence. "You are exceeding tolerance." She met its gaze unflinching. "So is the future," she replied. The human exhaled slowly beside her. She felt it through their connection, a steadying rhythm. He was afraid, of course he was, but not of her. That distinction mattered more than it should have. The enforcers advanced. Time responded, not by stopping but by thickening. Moments elongated, stretching like glass drawn from heat. She perceived every micro-adjustment in the field, every probability recalculating in response to her continued presence. In prior iterations, this was where she had released the subject, where obedience had restored coherence, and where the memory of loss had been born. Not now. "Listen to me," she said to him quietly, urgently. "What I am about to do has consequences I cannot fully remember yet." He glanced at her, eyes searching, then nodded once. "Do it anyway." She smiled, just barely. The future caught on that expression, startled. She stepped forward. The enforcers reacted instantly, energy constructs flaring to intercept. She did not evade them. She absorbed the impact, letting it pass through her temporal perception rather than her body. Pain flared, not physical but existential. Like being pulled in two directions at once, she held. And then she did something forbidden. She let the future look at him, not as a subject, not as a variable, but as a fixed point. The effect was immediate and violent. Probability collapsed inward, snapping toward a new center of gravity. The station's lights flickered, alarms cascading into silence as systems failed to reconcile the shift. The enforcers staggered, their control over the field disrupted. One of them reached for him. She moved faster than thought. Her hand closed around the enforcer's wrist, and for a heartbeat she shared with it what she remembered. The room filled with the echo of loss, not the absence of a body, the absence of meaning. The enforcer recoiled, systems destabilizing under the weight of an emotion it was not built to process. "This path is unsustainable," it said, voice fractured. "You will destabilize yourself." "I already have," she answered. She turned to him. "Stay with me," she said, not a command, a request. He tightened his grip in response. "I'm not going anywhere." The future surged again, but this time it did not threaten. It responded. She felt new memories forming, not ahead of her but alongside her. Moments that had no predetermined weight, laughter without context, silence without dread, loss without erasure, and something else, a realization. The pain she had remembered, the certainty of losing him, had not been a warning. It had been grief for a version of herself who never chose. The enforcers withdrew, recalibrating, no longer certain which anomaly required correction. "You will be reported," one said. "Yes," she replied, "I will." The station systems slowly resumed their hum, reality settling into a configuration that felt unfamiliar, not stable, alive. She released his wrist only when the pressure in the air finally eased. He looked at her, searching her face. Did we win? She considered the question, then shook her head slightly. No, she said. We began. And somewhere in the newly forming future, unwritten, unremembered, there was no longer a single moment of loss waiting for her. Only choices, and the terrifying, beautiful knowledge that she would have to live them as they came. She did not remember what came next. That absence was more disorienting than any future she had ever carried. They moved through the station under emergency clearance, doors opening before them, corridors rerouting in subtle acts of quiet defiance. The systems no longer opposed her directly. They hesitated, as if waiting to see who she would become. He walked beside her without asking where they were going. That, she realized, was new. In every remembered future there had been a moment where he asked why. Why her? Why now? Why him? This time he simply stayed. They entered a chamber older than the station itself, a space not listed on any public schematic. The walls were smooth and dark, threaded with faint lines of light that pulsed in slow, arrhythmic patterns. This was a place for recalibration, for beings who had drifted too far from their assigned vectors. She sealed the door behind them. The silence here was different, heavy, introspective. It pressed inward rather than outward. "This is where your people fix things," he said quietly. "Yes. Are we being fixed?" She turned to face him fully. The chamber's light traced the sharp planes of her face, softened the tension she no longer bothered to hide. "No," she said. "This is where they erase mistakes." Understanding crossed his expression. Not panic, not anger, just clarity. "And you brought me here because this room exists outside most remembered paths," she answered. "Because if there is still a version of the future where I lose you, it has not been written here." She felt it then, a hollow space where memory should have been. No ache, no warning, just possibility. It frightened her. He took a slow breath. "You don't sound like someone who's certain anymore." She let out a sound that might have been a laugh, unfamiliar and unpracticed. "No, I don't." The chamber reacted. The pulsing lines along the walls brightened, responding not to her presence, but to the instability in her temporal signature. The room had never been designed for doubt. It expected compliance or collapse. Instead, it found choice. She staggered as a wave of sensation rolled through her, memories she did not recognize flooding her awareness. Not futures, presents, moments forming without prior weight. She saw herself sitting beside him, not guarding, not observing, just existing. She saw arguments unresolved, silences endured. She saw him leaving once, coming back another time. No single moment carried dominance. Life uncompressed. She gasped, hand bracing against the wall. He was there instantly, steadying her. "Hey, what's happening?" "I'm experiencing time," she said, voice unsteady. "Not as memory, as uncertainty." His thumb brushed her wrist, grounding. "Welcome to it." The contact sent a tremor through her, not precognitive, not prophetic. Immediate. Raw. This was what her species avoided. Not pain, unknowing. The chamber's core activated. A low tone filled the space, resonant and absolute. Temporal realignment required. Subject must be separated. The words reverberated through her bones. She straightened slowly, heart racing, not from fear of the command but from the implication. If she stayed, she would lose the ability to remember outcomes before they happened. She would become human in the most dangerous way. She turned to him, eyes searching his face as if committing it to memory, not the future's memory but her own. "This is the last place where I can still walk away knowing what happens," she said. "If I don't, I won't remember how to protect you." He studied her, then reached up, resting his forehead lightly against hers. The gesture was uncalculated, human, intimate in its simplicity. "Then don't protect me from the future," he said. "Stand with me in the present." The chamber's light flared. She felt something fundamental loosen inside her, an anchor slipping free. For the first time, she could not see what she would lose, only what she was choosing to risk. She closed her eyes, and let the future go. When the light faded, the chamber was quiet. Too quiet. The lines along the walls had gone dark, leaving only the faint ambient glow of the station beyond the sealed door. The low hum she had always felt, time's constant pressure against her awareness, was gone, not muted. Gone. She stood very still, afraid to test the absence. Her mind reached instinctively forward, searching for weight, for resistance, for the familiar pull of what would matter. There was nothing, her breath caught, sharp and involuntary. This was not how it was supposed to feel. Futures were never silent. Even the avoided ones left echoes, warnings, residue. Now there was only the present, unlayered, unbuffered, immediate. He was watching her, eyes searching for signs of collapse. "What did you do?" he asked softly. She swallowed. "I stopped remembering." The words felt fragile, as if speaking them might undo what she had chosen. Her pulse was unregulated now, unanchored from predictive stabilization. Every sensation arrived without context, without preparation. Too bright, too close, too real. The chamber door unlocked with a muted click. No alarms followed. No enforcers arrived. That frightened her more than resistance ever had. They stepped back into the corridor together. The station moved around them, routine traffic resuming, systems recalibrated into a new equilibrium. She felt invisible in a way she never had before. Not hidden, unaccounted for. "I don't feel them anymore," she said. "Your people." "Yes, or time. I can't tell which I'm missing." He considered that. Maybe you were using one to listen to the other. The thought settled uncomfortably well. They walked in silence until they reached a viewport overlooking the station's outer ring. Beyond it, a planet turned slowly, clouded and blue-green, alive in ways no projection could predict. She pressed her palm to the glass. Before, she would have felt the gravity of futures pulling at her awareness, possible outcomes clustering, weighted by significance. Now there was only the planet as it was, turning, existing, unconcerned with what came next. A sharp ache rose in her chest, not loss, fear. "What if I made the wrong choice?" she asked quietly. He did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was steady, grounded. "You don't know that yet. That's the problem." He stepped closer. "That's the point." She turned to face him, truly face him, without the filter of foresight softening the edges. The uncertainty was overwhelming, but beneath it was something else, relief. The future had never allowed her to want, only to remember. "I don't know what I am now," she said. He met her gaze. "You're here." The simplicity of it nearly undid her. The station lights dimmed briefly, a system-wide acknowledgement of anomaly resolution. Somewhere, a report would be filed. A deviation noted and quietly archived under non-repeatable conditions. She would not be summoned. She would not be corrected. She had become something the future could no longer recognize. And that meant. Her breath caught as another realization surfaced, slow and devastating. The memory of losing him had vanished, not softened, not reinterpreted, erased. In its place was nothing, no warning, no certainty, just risk. She looked at him, eyes bright with something dangerously close to wonder. "I don't know how long this will last," she said. "I don't know what happens to us." He smiled, small and real. "Neither do I." For the first time, the words did not terrify her. They grounded her. Somewhere behind them, the station continued its endless calculations, blind now to the quiet rebellion unfolding within its walls. And somewhere ahead, unseen, unremembered, their story waited to be written not by foresight, but by choice. The station marked the end of her anomaly with silence. No summons came, no correction followed. Her name, once threaded through predictive systems and temporal ledgers, simply stopped appearing, not erased, unreferenced, as if the future, deprived of her signal, no longer knew where to look. She woke to that realization slowly, lying beside the viewport in her quarters, watching the planet's reflected light crawl across the ceiling. Sleep had come without premonition, dreamless, uncharted, human. He was there when she opened her eyes, seated a short distance away, back against the wall, legs drawn in loosely, awake, waiting, Not guarding, just present. "You don't look like someone who knows what's going to happen," he said gently. She sat up, the movement uncoordinated in a way that would have alarmed her once. "I don't. How does that feel?" She searched for the answer and found no memory to borrow from. "Like standing at the edge of something vast," she said, "with no map." He nodded as if that made sense. Perhaps it did. They spent the cycle in quiet motion, walking corridors without destination, observing ordinary moments she had once filtered out as statistically irrelevant. Engineers laughing over minor failures. A human child staring, wide-eyed, at a star larger than any she had ever seen from her homeworld. Each moment arrived and passed without leaving weight behind. This, she realized, was what the future had always taken from her. Toward the end of the cycle, the station's core emitted a low-frequency resonance, a system-level adjustment. Not an alarm, a recalculation. She felt it in her bones. Something was changing. Her species had built safeguards into time itself, fail-safes for deviations too large to ignore. When predictive absence reached a threshold, reality did not intervene with force. It asked a question. A single transmission bloomed into existence in the air before them, unsourced, unaddressed, temporal pathway unresolved. Designate continuity or release. She understood immediately. Designate continuity, anchor herself. Re-enter remembered time. Become again what she had been, with knowledge restored, outcomes visible, safety assured. Release. Let go completely. Remain here unmoored. No future protection. No return. She felt the choice settle into her chest, not as pressure but as invitation. He read her expression. "Is that for you?" "Yes." "And if you choose the first option, I will remember what happens to us. And the second?" She hesitated. "I won't." He stood, closing the distance between them. "Which one scares you more?" She looked at the hovering words, at the final chance to reclaim certainty. Then she looked at him. The future stirred, distant now, like an old habit trying to resurface. It offered nothing. No warning, no promise. Just the possibility of control. She reached out, not toward the projection, toward him. The transmission flickered, awaiting input. She did not answer it. Instead, she let the moment pass. The station did not react immediately. Systems recalculated. Time hesitated, confused by the absence of compliance. Somewhere beyond the hull, the planet continued to turn. And somewhere ahead, unwritten, unremembered, a future without guarantees